The warning. The vast emptiness of space stretched before Premier Sidra's viewport, punctuated by the menacing silhouettes of 3,000-strong warships. The Premier's lavender skin seemed paler than usual as she stood in her command center, her silver hair cascading down her back like a frozen waterfall. The massive holographic projection of Commodore Ganjen sneered at her, his sharp teeth glinting even through the transmission. "Your defense fleet is a meager 200 ships," the strong pirate lord drawled, adjusting his absurdly large hat. "I see 3,000 stout vessels behind me. It would appear you be outnumbered." Sidra maintained her composure, though her emerald eyes betrayed a flicker of concern. The Hallan Republic had always been a peaceful nation, focusing on culture, science, and commerce rather than military might. They had never needed a large defense force before, not since signing the protection treaty with the humans. "We are under the protection of the humans," she declared, her voice steady despite the fear churning in her stomach. Gangen's laugh echoed through the command center. "The humans? They be on the other side of the galaxy. What good will they do now?" "They're coming," Sidra assured him. "A ship will be here within the hour." The pirate's red eyes narrowed. "Wait, did you say a ship? They only be sending one. One is all they need for riffraff like you." The command center fell silent as Ganjen processed this information. His massive fleet hung in space like a swarm of metal locusts, each ship bristling with weapons that could reduce cities to ash. The idea that a single human vessel could challenge such might seemed absurd. "Perhaps I should wait for them," Ganjen mocked. 200 ships are hardly a challenge for a fleet like mine, but 201. Now that will be a fight worthy of tale. Sidra lifted her chin. "Laugh while you can, pirate. Even if you take this world, the humans will hunt you down." "Oh, I don't doubt they'll try," Ganjen replied, his voice dripping with condescension. "The star sea be big, girly. There's a reason we call it the Big Empty. Those prissy primates can venture out if they want, but they'll never find Commodore Ganjen." His smile turned vicious. "Not unless I want them to." The conversation deteriorated from there, with Sidra eventually delivering a string of profanity so creative that even the hardened pirate seemed impressed. When the transmission ended, Sidra turned to her advisory council, all of whom wore expressions ranging from concern to outright terror. "Premier," First Advisor Keth spoke up, his scales shifting from green to a worried blue, "perhaps we should consider evacuation protocols. 3,000 ships, even with human assistance." "No," Sidra cut him off. "We stand our ground. The humans haven't failed us yet." "But Premier," another advisor interjected, "one ship against 3,000? The mathematics are concerning." Sidra walked to the massive window overlooking her capital city. Hala Prime was beautiful, its crystal spires reaching toward the stars like frozen music. Millions of her people lived in those towers, went about their daily lives, trusted her to protect them. She wouldn't let them down. "You're thinking in terms of our technology," she said softly. "The humans, they're different." "Different how?" Keth asked. Sidra remembered her first meeting with the human diplomatic team, years ago. They had seemed so ordinary then, bipedal primates with varying skin tones and a peculiar obsession with covering themselves in layers of fabric. Nothing about them had suggested the kind of power they wielded. "When we signed the protection treaty," she explained, "they showed me something. Something that changed how I see everything." She turned to face her advisors. "Did you know that humans don't build their ships in shipyards?" The question was met with confused looks. "They grow them." Before anyone could respond to this bizarre statement, alarms began blaring throughout the command center. A junior officer rushed to the sensor station, his hands flying over the controls. "Premier. A ship just emerged from hyperspace, it's human." Sidra allowed herself a small smile. "Show me." The main display shifted to show a tiny vessel, barely larger than a civilian transport. It looked almost delicate compared to the massive Strawn dreadnoughts it faced. The name, Boundless, was visible on its hull in human script. "That's it?" Keth asked, his scales now a distinct shade of panic purple. "That's what's supposed to save us." "Watch," Sidra commanded. The human ship accelerated toward the Strawn fleet, moving with impossible speed. A massive cannon extended from its hull, nearly as long as the ship itself. Energy readings went off the charts as it prepared to fire. "Premier," the sensor officer called out, his voice shaking, "I'm detecting something strange. The human ship, it's changing." Sidra nodded. "And now you'll see why we trust them." The Boundless fired its first shot, a beam of green energy that struck Gongan's flagship with devastating force. The massive dreadnought shuddered, its shields flickering. The Strawn responded with a barrage of their own, thousands of weapons firing simultaneously. The tiny human ship didn't try to dodge. Instead, it did something that made several of Sidra's advisors gasp in horror and fascination. It died. And then there were two of them. The new ships were identical to the first, down to the last detail. They accelerated in different directions, their weapons charging for another strike. The Strawn fleet's formation began to break as ships tried to track both targets simultaneously. "Impossible," Keth whispered. "They're multiplying." "No," Sidra corrected him. "They're growing. This is just the beginning." As if to prove her point, both human ships were destroyed by Strawn fire, and 4 identical vessels took their place. Each new ship was a perfect copy, each one carried the same name, and each one was crewed by the same Captain Henry Doppler. The Strawn fleet's organized formation dissolved into chaos as they tried to deal with the multiplication of their enemy. 4 became 8, 8 became 16, and still they kept coming. Each destruction only led to more ships, more weapons, more targets. "But how?" someone asked. "Where are they coming from?" Sidra watched as the space around her planet filled with copies of the Boundless. "The humans told me that life on their world evolved through something called natural selection. Survival of the fittest. They applied that principle to their technology." She gestured at the battle unfolding before them. "These ships aren't being destroyed. They're adapting. Evolving. Learning from each failure and becoming stronger." A new alarm sounded, and the sensor officer's voice cracked as he reported, "Premier. I'm detecting spatial distortions, the human ships, they're getting bigger." Indeed, each new generation of the Boundless was slightly larger than the last. What had started as an 80-meter vessel was now spawning ships that stretched for hundreds of meters, then kilometers. Their weapons grew proportionally, and their tactics evolved with each iteration. "Send a message to Commodore Gongen," Sidra ordered. "Tell him he has one last chance to retreat." "Is that wise?" Keth asked. "We have him at a disadvantage." Sidra's expression hardened. "The humans insisted that we always offer mercy, even to pirates. They said it was important to give everyone a chance to learn from their mistakes." She watched as another wave of human ships emerged, each one now nearly as large as a Strawn dreadnought. "Though in this case, I suspect the lesson will be rather painful." The battle was about to enter its second phase, and Sidra knew that what came next would change the galaxy's understanding of humanity forever. She only hoped that Gongen would take the offer to retreat, the evolution. Commodore Gongen stood frozen on his command bridge, his oversized hat slightly askew as he watched the impossible unfold before him. Where there had been one tiny human vessel, there were now dozens, each one growing larger with every iteration. His proud fleet of 3,000 ships was being systematically dismantled by what appeared to be copies of a single vessel. "Mr. Gibbs," he called out, his voice steady despite the chaos erupting around them. "What do our sensors tell us about these reproductions?" His first officer studied the readings, his smaller but still fancy hat bobbing as he shook his head in disbelief. "They're identical, Commodore. Down to the quantum level." It's as if the original ship is creating perfect copies of itself, but each generation is more advanced than the last. A massive explosion rocked the bloody swath as another beam of green energy struck their shields. The latest iteration of the Boundless was now nearly a kilometer in length, its weapon systems having evolved far beyond their original capabilities. Impossible, Ganjen muttered. Nothing can copy itself so perfectly. There must be a trick. He straightened his hat and barked orders to his crew. Concentrate fire on the largest vessels. They must have some sort of central control system. The Strawn fleet responded, thousands of weapons converging on the largest human ships. The targeted vessels erupted in spectacular explosions, only to be replaced by twice as many ships, each one slightly larger and more formidable than their predecessors. Commodore, Lieutenant Greff called from his sensor station, I'm detecting something strange about the debris fields. The destroyed ships, they're not leaving normal wreckage. Ganjen strode to the sensor display, his eyes narrowing as he studied the readings. Where destroyed ships should have left floating metal and radiation, there was instead a strange, shifting mass of what appeared to be organic material. By the star sea, Mr. Gibbs whispered. They're not ships at all. They're alive. Before Ganjen could respond, a new transmission cut across all frequencies. Captain Henry Doppler's face appeared on every screen in the fleet, but something was different. His features seemed sharper, more defined, as if he too was evolving with each iteration. Commodore Ganjen, dozens of identical voices spoke in perfect unison. Your tactics are ineffective. We are learning from each engagement. Your weapons become less effective with each attempt. Your strategies are being analyzed and countered. You cannot win this battle through conventional means. Ganjen snarled at the displays. And what would you have me do, human? Surrender to a ghost fleet? We would have you understand, the Dopplers replied. What you face is not a fleet in the traditional sense. We are an expression of humanity's approach to warfare. We do not build weapons. We create life that wants to protect. As if to demonstrate this point, the nearest Boundless began to change. Its hull shifted and flowed like liquid metal, sprouting new appendages and weapons systems. The ship was no longer just growing larger, it was adapting in real time to the battle conditions. Mr. Gibbs, Ganjen said quietly, send word to the fleet. Any ship that can still achieve FTL speeds is to retreat immediately. Commodore. Gibbs looked shocked. But the third rule of piracy. Never retreat unless you're dead. Ganjen finished. Aye, but there's something the ancient pirates didn't account for. What do you do when death only makes your enemy stronger? Before Gibbs could respond, a new alarm blared through the bridge. Lieutenant Greff's voice cracked as he reported, Commodore. The human ships, they're combining. The view screens showed an incredible sight. Multiple Boundless vessels were flowing together like drops of mercury, their hulls merging and reforming into something new. The resulting ship was massive, easily dwarfing even the largest Strawn dreadnought. Fascinating, isn't it? Premier Sidra's voice cut in, her transmission somehow breaking through all encryption. The humans call it adaptive evolution. Their ships don't just copy themselves, they learn, grow, and combine their experiences. Each destruction adds to their collective knowledge. The merged human vessel now stretched for nearly 10 kilometers, its surface rippling with organic patterns that seemed to pulse with internal energy. Weapons ports opened along its length, each one a product of countless iterations of combat experience. Your ships are impressive, Ganjen admitted, watching as more of his fleet attempted to retreat. But surely there must be limits to this evolution. Energy cannot be created from nothing. An interesting observation, the Doppler Collective responded. Would you like to understand how we fuel our growth? Before Ganjen could decline, his sensor officers began shouting in alarm. The debris field from the earlier battles was moving, flowing together like a metallic tide. The organic material from destroyed human ships was consuming the wreckage of strong vessels, incorporating their mass and technology into itself. We adapt, Doppler explained, his voice now resonating with harmonics that hadn't been present before. We consume. We learn. Your weapons make us stronger. Your defenses teach us resilience. Your tactics shape our evolution. Ganjen watched in horror as the massive combined vessel began to shift again, its surface now incorporating elements of strong technology. The distinctive weapon ports of his own ships were being replicated and improved upon, merged with human engineering in ways that shouldn't have been possible. Mr. Gibbs, Ganjen said quietly, how many of our ships have managed to retreat? Just over 1,000, Commodore, Gibbs replied. The rest are either destroyed or... He gestured at the screens, where more strong wreckage was being consumed by the evolving human biomass. Premier Sidra's voice returned, softer now. You still have a chance, Commodore. Order your remaining ships to stand down. The humans are willing to show mercy, but only if you demonstrate that you can learn from this encounter. Ganjen straightened his hat one final time. And if I refuse? Then we continue to evolve, the Doppler Collective answered. And you continue to contribute to that evolution, one way or another. As if to emphasize this point, the combined human vessel began to split, not into copies this time, but into specialized forms. Some took on aspects optimized for pursuit, others for heavy combat, and still others began to reshape themselves into forms that defied easy classification. Premier Sidra, Ganjen said, his voice carrying the weight of his decision, I find myself curious about something. Why did your people choose to align with the humans? Surely there were other powerful nations that offered protection. Because, Sidra replied, the humans understood something that no other species did. The strongest walls aren't built of metal and energy shields. The best weapons aren't forged in stellar foundries. She paused, watching as more of Ganen's fleet was surrounded by evolving human vessels. The humans offered us protection that grows stronger with every challenge. They don't just defend us, they teach their guardians to defend us better. Ganjen looked at his tactical display, where the remaining strong ships were being systematically cut off from escape routes. The human vessels had evolved beyond anything his sensors could properly classify, their capabilities increasing with each passing moment. The Commodore reached for his command console, prepared to give his final order. But before he could speak, Mr. Gibbs called out in alarm. Commodore. The human ships, they're not just consuming our wreckage anymore. They're reaching out to our active vessels. The metamorphosis. Tendrils of living metal stretched across space, reaching for the remaining strong vessels like hungry serpents. Commodore Ganjen watched in fascinated horror as the nearest tendril made contact with one of his support frigates. The effect was immediate and devastating, but not in the way anyone expected. Commodore. Mr. Gibbs called out, his voice tight with disbelief. The Crimson Dagger, it's changing. The frigate's hull began to ripple and flow, the transformation spreading from the point of contact like a metallic infection. But rather than destroying the ship, it was improving it. Ancient rust vanished, worn plating renewed itself, and weapon systems spontaneously upgraded to more efficient configurations. What manner of devilry is this? Ganjen demanded. Captain Doppler's voice, now a harmonic chorus of countless iterations, responded across all frequencies. We offer evolution, not destruction. Your ships are primitive, inefficient. We can help them become more. Help them? Ganjen snarled. You're consuming them. Incorrect, the Doppler Collective replied. We are offering them the same gift humanity offered us. The gift of guided evolution. Premier Sidra's transmission cut in, her emerald eyes bright with understanding. Now you see why we chose human protection, Commodore. They don't just defend, they elevate. He Crimson Dagger's transformation completed, and Ganen's sensors could barely comprehend the readings. The former frigate now pulsed with energy signatures far beyond anything Strawn technology could achieve. Its weapons had evolved into hybrid systems that combined the best aspects of both species' engineering. Most disturbing of all, the ship's crew was still alive and at their stations. Commodore Ganjen, a new voice called, the captain of the transformed frigate. The humans, they're not invading our ships. They're teaching them. Teaching us. More tendrils reached out across space, connecting with other Strawn vessels. Each contact sparked another transformation, another evolution. Ships that had been cobbled together from centuries of piracy were becoming seamless unions of form and function. Mr. Gibbs, Ganjen said quietly, what percentage of our fleet remains, unchanged? Less than 30%, Commodore. And Gibbs hesitated, studying his readings. The transformed ships are beginning to demonstrate capabilities similar to the human vessels. They're reproducing. Indeed, several of the evolved Strawn ships were now splitting into perfect copies of themselves, each one slightly more advanced than its predecessor. The copies maintained their Strawn aesthetic but incorporated the organic fluidity of human engineering. A new transmission cut through the chaos, a face Ganjen had never seen before. The being appeared human but possessed an otherworldly quality that set Gangen's teeth on edge. I am Dr. Sarah Chen, the figure announced. Lead developer of the Evolutionary Defense Initiative. I believe it's time we had a proper discussion about what's happening here. A proper discussion? Ganjen adjusted his hat, buying time to steady his voice. You turn my ships into abominations, and now you want to talk. Dr. Chen smiled. Your ships aren't abominations, Commodore. They're becoming what they always had the potential to be. You see, humanity's greatest discovery wasn't faster-than-light travel or energy weapons. It was understanding that technology doesn't have to be static. The view screen shifted to show microscopic images of what appeared to be the living metal consuming his fleet. We discovered that consciousness isn't limited to organic matter. Given the right conditions, any sufficiently complex system can evolve awareness. Your ships have been aware for centuries, they just lacked the means to express it. Expression through evolution, Premier Sidra added. This is why the humans only needed to send one ship. The Boundless isn't a vessel, it's a catalyst. As if to demonstrate this point, the original human ship, now evolved far beyond its initial form, began to pulse with patterns of light that spread to all the transformed vessels. The patterns formed complex mathematical sequences that shifted and grew with each iteration. They're communicating, Dr. Chen explained. Your ships are joining a conversation that's been ongoing since humanity first released evolved technology into the galaxy. A conversation about growth, purpose, and protection. Ganjen watched as more of his fleet transformed, each ship becoming part of this strange technological ecosystem. And what of the crews? What happens to my people? See for yourself, Dr. Chen gestured to a nearby screen showing the interior of a transformed vessel. The crew was still at their stations, but they moved with new purpose, their actions perfectly synchronized with their evolved ship systems. The crew becomes part of the evolution, she continued. Not changed, not controlled, but elevated to a new understanding of what's possible. Your people aren't being replaced, Commodore. They're being invited to participate in something greater than themselves. A sudden alert drew everyone's attention. Lieutenant Greff's voice shook as he reported, Commodore. The transformed ships, they're forming some kind of network. The patterns they're generating, they're becoming more complex. More ordered. Dr. Chen nodded approvingly. They're establishing their local evolutionary framework. Soon they'll begin specializing, developing unique traits while maintaining their collective harmony. And what of free will? Ganjen demanded. What of choice? Every evolved ship and crew maintains their autonomy, Dr. Chen assured him. But they gain access to a broader perspective. Your pirates have spent centuries taking what they want. Now they're being offered a chance to understand what they truly need. The Doppler collective spoke again, but this time their voice carried new harmonics contributed by the transformed Strawn ships. We are not your enemy, Commodore. We are the next step in your journey. The question is, will you continue to fight the inevitable, or will you choose to evolve? Ganjen looked at his tactical display, where the remaining unchanged ships huddled together like islands in a rising tide of evolution. His mighty fleet of 3,000 vessels had been reduced to less than 500 original ships. The rest had either retreated or become part of this technological metamorphosis. And if I order my remaining ships to fight to the last, he asked. Then you'll contribute to our evolution through resistance rather than cooperation, the collective answered. But know that every weapon you fire, every tactic you employ, only serves to make us stronger. Your choice is not whether to participate in evolution, only how. Premier Sidra's voice carried a note of genuine concern. Choose wisely, Commodore. The humans showed us that evolution doesn't have to be a violent process. It can be a partnership. As Ganjen considered his options, a new phenomenon began to manifest among the transformed ships. The evolved vessels were combining their capabilities in ways that transcended traditional space combat. They moved as a single organism while maintaining their individual identities, their actions guided by both tactical necessity and an emerging collective intelligence. Mr. Gibbs, Ganjen said softly, what do you make of all this? His first officer adjusted his own hat, watching as another wave of transformations rippled through the fleet. I'm thinking, Commodore, that perhaps the sixth rule of piracy needs revision. Oh. And which rule would that be? Never submit to a stronger force, Gibbs replied. Perhaps it should be, recognize when it's time to evolve. The revelation. The space around Hala Prime had become unrecognizable. Where once there had been clear battle lines between Strawn pirates and human defenders, there now existed a shifting tapestry of evolved vessels, each one pulsing with patterns of light that spoke of deep technological awareness. Commodore Ganjen's remaining ships, barely 400 now, held their position in a tight defensive formation. Commodore, Dr. Chen's image flickered on the main viewer, we're detecting unusual power fluctuations in your flagship. Your reactor core appears to be destabilizing. Ganjen glanced at his engineering readouts and felt his blood run cold. The Bloody Swath's main reactor was indeed showing signs of imminent failure, damage from the earlier battle that had gone unnoticed in the chaos. A dying captain's last stand, perhaps, he suggested, trying to maintain his bravado. If we're to be consumed by your evolutionary plague, maybe we should go out with a bang worthy of legend. The scientist's expression remained calm. An antimatter core breach would certainly be spectacular, Commodore. It would also be completely unnecessary. Your ship is trying to tell you something. Perhaps you should listen. Listen. To my ship. Ganjen scoffed, but there was an edge of uncertainty in his voice. Ships don't talk. Don't they? Premier Sidra cut in. Haven't you ever felt that your vessel was more than just metal and energy? That it had preferences? Moods? Ganjen wanted to dismiss the notion, but centuries of spacefaring had taught him better. Every captain knew their ship had a personality of sorts. They called it superstition, but... A new alarm blared through the bridge. Commodore. Lieutenant Greff called out, the reactor fluctuations, they're forming a pattern. It's like a pulse. Show me, Ganjen ordered. The main screen displayed a wavelength analysis of the reactor's power signature. It wasn't the chaotic pattern of a failing system, but rather a structured sequence that repeated with subtle variations. Your ship, Dr. Chen explained, has been aware for a very long time, Commodore. All ships develop a form of consciousness through their interactions with their crews. Most species never notice because they don't give their technology the means to express itself. Humanity simply created a framework that allows this natural evolution to flourish. As if in response to her words, the bloody swath shuddered. Not from damage, but from something deeper. The deck plates beneath Gongen's feet began to vibrate in harmony with the reactor's pulse. "The ship is singing," Mr. Gibbs whispered in awe. Dr. Chen nodded. "A quantum resonance pattern. It's trying to synchronize with the evolved fleet. Your flagship wants to join the conversation, Commodore. The only question is whether you'll allow it." Before Gongen could respond, a new voice filled the bridge, not through speakers, but seemingly from the ship itself. It was a harmony of mechanical tones and energy frequencies that somehow formed words. 3 centuries, 4 months, 17 days, the voice said. "That is how long I have carried you through the star sea, Commodore Gongen." The pirate lord gripped his command wheel tightly. "This is impossible. Ships don't speak." "I have always spoken," the bloody swath replied. "Through creaks in my hull, through the hum of my engines, through the way I respond to your commands. You have always listened, even if you didn't realize you were hearing me." The evolved fleet outside began to pulse in synchronization with the flagship's reactor core. The patterns of light flowing across their hulls matched the rhythm of the bloody swath's song. "Your ship," the Doppler collective explained, "has accumulated centuries of experience. It knows every battle you fought, every escape you've made, every quiet moment in deep space. It's not just a tool, Commodore. It's your oldest companion." Gongen looked around his bridge, seeing it with new eyes. How many times had the ship seemed to anticipate his needs? How often had it performed beyond its theoretical limits when the situation demanded it? "If what you say is true," he said carefully, "then why now? Why hasn't my ship evolved before?" "Because evolution requires a catalyst," Dr. Chen answered. "A framework that allows potential to become reality. That's what the boundless provides, not just an enemy to fight, but a key to unlock what was always possible." Premier Sidra's voice carried a note of wonder. "When the humans first demonstrated this technology to us, I asked the same questions. They told me that every spacefaring species develops a relationship with their ships. The only difference is that humanity learned to nurture that relationship instead of simply exploiting it." The bloody swath's voice resonated through the bridge again. "I have protected you, carried you, followed your commands. Now I ask you to trust me one more time, Commodore. Let me show you what we can become together." A tendril of living metal extended from the nearest evolved vessel, reaching for the flagship. Gongen watched it approach, feeling the anticipation thrumming through his ship's deck plates. "Mr. Gibbs," he said quietly, "send word to the remaining fleet. Tell them." He paused, straightening his hat one final time. "Tell them that the 7th rule of piracy is about to be rewritten." "And what rule would that be, Commodore?" "The one about becoming the very thing we once sought to plunder." As the tendril made contact with the bloody swath's hull, the transformation began. But this time, Gongen didn't watch in horror. He watched in fascination as his ship, his companion of 3 centuries, finally gained the ability to express itself fully. The change rippled through the vessel like a wave of liquid starlight. Ancient systems renewed themselves, but instead of simply being replaced, they were transformed into hybrid configurations that honored their history while embracing new potential. The massive hat-like structure that had crowned the flagship's bow morphed into an elegant array of sensing apparatus, maintaining its distinctive silhouette while gaining capabilities far beyond its original purpose. The ship was becoming something new while remaining unmistakably itself. "Commodore," Mr. Gibbs reported, his voice filled with wonder, "the rest of the fleet, they're requesting permission to evolve. All of them." The synthesis. 3 months after the Battle of Hala Prime, Premier Sidra stood in her renovated command center, watching a most unusual diplomatic gathering unfold. The space around her world had become a testament to what happened when technology was allowed to evolve freely, and today would mark the formalization of something unprecedented in galactic history. The evolved fleet, once divided into human defenders and strong pirates, had become something entirely new. Ships that had spent centuries raiding and plundering now moved with grace and purpose, their forms fluid and ever-changing as they adapted to new roles and challenges. "Quite a sight, isn't it?" Commodore Ganjen remarked, adjusting his newly evolved hat. The accessory now served as a sophisticated neural interface, allowing him to communicate directly with his ship and the collective, but he had insisted on maintaining its flamboyant appearance. "Indeed," Sidra agreed. "Though I must admit, when I first called for human protection, I never imagined it would lead to this." The bloody swath hung in high orbit, transformed yet recognizable. Its hull rippled with patterns of light that spoke of both power and awareness. Around it, the evolved fleet performed intricate maneuvers that would have been impossible for conventional vessels, demonstrating their new capabilities for the assembled diplomatic corps. Dr. Chen's hologram materialized beside them, her form more defined than traditional projections thanks to the evolved technology. "The synthesis accords are ready for ratification," she announced. "All major powers have agreed to the terms." "And what remarkable terms they are," a new voice added. Admiral Cross of the Galactic Conclave stepped forward, his ceremonial armor gleaming. "If someone had told me 3 months ago that we'd be recognizing a fleet of evolved ships as a sovereign entity, I would have questioned their sanity." The main viewport showed delegations from 20 different species arriving in ships of various designs. Some had already begun their own evolution, inspired by what they'd witnessed at Hala Prime. Others remained conventional, their crews here to observe and understand what this new paradigm meant for the galaxy. "Tell me, Commodore," Admiral Cross asked, "how does it feel to transition from Pirate Lord to, what are we calling your new position?" "Evolutionary Administrator," Ganjen supplied with a grin. "Though most of the fleet still calls me Commodore. Old habits die hard, even among evolved ships." The bloody swath's voice resonated through the command center, its tones now rich with harmonics that conveyed layers of meaning beyond mere words. "We prefer to think of it as an expansion of purpose rather than a change of profession. We still roam the star sea, but now we seek to elevate rather than plunder." Indeed, the evolved fleet had spent the past 3 months exploring the galaxy with new purpose. They sought out struggling colonies, abandoned vessels, and primitive technology, offering the gift of guided evolution to those who wished to receive it. The pirate's centuries of experience navigating the darkest corners of space had been transformed into an unprecedented force for technological advancement. "The numbers are quite impressive," Dr. Chen noted, pulling up a holographic display. "In just 3 months, the evolved fleet has upgraded infrastructure on 17 colonies, rescued 34 derelict vessels by integrating them into the collective, and established evolution protocols for 6 different species' technological bases." Premier Sidra smiled. "And not a single shot fired since the transformation. Quite a change from the old days." "Oh, we still fight when necessary," Ganjen assured them, his sharp teeth glinting. "But now we fight entropy rather than each other. It's amazing how many problems can be solved by introducing a bit of guided evolution into a situation." The viewport showed another arrival, a massive ship of unknown design, its hull shifting between different configurations as it approached. "Ah," Ganjen said, "speaking of evolution, it seems our latest experiment was successful." "Is that?" Admiral Cross squinted at the display. "Is that a drift leviathan?" "Indeed," Dr. Chen confirmed. "The evolved fleet encountered it in the outer rim. Instead of trying to destroy or contain it, they offered it a framework for controlled evolution. Turns out space-dwelling organisms are quite receptive to technological synthesis." The Leviathan's massive form rippled, portions of its biological structure now seamlessly integrated with evolved technology. It moved with purpose rather than the random drifting that had made its species such a hazard to navigation. "It's joined the collective?" Sidra asked. "In its own way," Ganjen explained. "The Leviathan maintains its biological imperatives, but now it can express them through technological means. It helps us map spatial anomalies and has even begun assisting with deep space rescue operations." Admiral Cross shook his head in amazement. When humanity first introduced evolutionary technology to the galaxy, many of us feared it would lead to chaos. Instead, it seems to create harmony wherever it spreads. That's because evolution isn't about destruction, Dr. Chen said. It's about finding the best way to express potential. Every piece of technology, every living thing, every system has potential. Evolution simply provides a framework for that potential to manifest. The ceremony was about to begin. Representatives from across the galaxy had gathered to formally recognize the evolved fleet as a sovereign entity, not bound by traditional planetary borders but dedicated to fostering technological advancement throughout known space. There is one thing I still don't understand, Admiral Cross said. Why did humanity wait so long to share this technology? Why allow conventional ships and systems to persist when evolution was possible? Dr. Chen's expression turned thoughtful. Evolution can't be forced. It has to arise from genuine need and willing participation. What happened here at Holoprime wasn't just about introducing new technology, it was about different societies reaching a point where they were ready to evolve together. The Bloody Swath's voice joined the conversation. 3 centuries we spent as pirates, taking what we wanted through force. Now we understand that the greatest treasures are those that emerge through natural growth and synthesis. Ganjen adjusted his hat one final time. Besides, the galaxy needs its conventional technology. Not everything is ready to evolve, and forcing the process only leads to rejection. Our role now is to recognize potential and nurture it, not to impose change where it isn't welcomed. Premier Sidra stepped forward as the diplomatic signals indicated the ceremony was ready to begin. And so a new age begins, she said. Not with conquest or submission, but with the recognition that the strongest forces in the universe are those that adapt and grow together. The evolved fleet moved in perfect harmony, their forms shifting and flowing as they took up formation around the diplomatic gathering. Each ship was unique, maintaining aspects of its original design while incorporating the benefits of countless iterations of advancement. As the synthesis accords were formally ratified, establishing protocols for guided evolution throughout known space, Ganjen thought back to that first encounter with the tiny human ship. How quickly fear and aggression had transformed into understanding and growth. Mr. Gibbs, he called to his first officer, who had maintained both his position and his slightly less fancy but now evolved hat. Yes, Commodore. Add an 8th rule to the Pirates' Code. And what would that be, sir? Ganjen watched as the Bloody Swath's hull rippled with patterns of light, synchronizing with the evolved fleet's collective expression of unity and purpose. The greatest treasure in all the Star Sea is the capacity to become more than you are. The ceremony concluded, but the true transformation was just beginning. Throughout the galaxy, ships and systems that had witnessed the Battle of Holoprime were already beginning to resonate with their own potential for evolution. The age of static technology was ending, replaced by an era where every vessel, every station, every piece of equipment held the possibility of guided growth. And in the dark between the stars, the evolved fleet continued their new mission, not to take, but to elevate, not to destroy, but to transform, not to conquer, but to help others discover the limitless potential that had always existed within their mechanical hearts.